the senators set to question Zuckerberg today, Republican Senator Sen Moran of Kansas. Jerry, what do you want to hear from Mark Zuckerberg in this hearing?
Well, I'm certainly pleased with what he said in just a few moments ago that you just reported on. But I think what I want to know for certain is that here's the problem. Explain to us in full detail who's affected, how it happened, and is there more disclosures to come? Have you disclosed everything that you know that has gone wrong? The number of people whose privacy has been invaded. But then isn't the most important thing, what are you going to do to make certain that Facebook never allows this to happen again in the future? And by this, I mean the invasion of people's property. I think the surprise, the shock to me was that someone else can consent to disclose information about their friends. And so I want the assurance that Facebook has seen the challenges and is now prepared to make certain that this is a thing of the past, not a thing of the future.
So there are two issues at play here that Mark addressed in his prepared remarks. One is the Cambridge Analytica data breach. The other is Russian interference on Facebook's platform to meddle in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. How do you think Facebook has handled both of those situations?
Well, what I know to date, while I'm pleased with the steps that I've been told Facebook has taken since the disclosure, again, it's surprising, if not shocking, that this kind of data breach can occur. And I know from my experience with Facebook, the ability for them to get, for people to understand, the consumer to understand their rights when they sign a consent, it is a very convoluted process. So I take this, I mean, you have to be skeptical because I don't think Facebook has been in the right position to begin with in protecting their customers, Facebook users. And so concerned that what is said today is followed up by dramatic changes, significant changes in the way that Facebook does business. So a lot of complaints and concerns. And you know, I think that while I appreciate that Mark Zuckerberg says that Facebook is going to operate now for the betterment of the world in a sense, you know, there is a lot of disillusionment with all the institutions, and people over time, their relationships have changed. Facebook and other social media mediums have become a way of communicating, a sense of connectedness to other people. And now we've learned that Facebook is not a place that you can rely upon for your own personal data security, for your own privacy. And as the world becomes, in a sense, less engaged on a personal basis and more on social media, I think the issue of privacy becomes all the more important. I chair the subcommittee on data security in the Commerce Committee. This is the issue that seems to me to be front and center. We want our elections to be free and fair, but I mostly want to make certain that Facebook changes its method of doing business to protect the American consumer, the Facebook user.
Senator, is more regulation necessary?
Well, I've not reached that conclusion. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, has authority and, in fact, has entered into a consent agreement with Facebook. I think before we reach a conclusion that more or additional regulation is required, let's find out what's the content of that agreement, that consent agreement, and has Facebook lived up to the letter of that agreement, what it committed to the FTC to do. And it's hard to know that from talking to the FTC because it's an ongoing matter, but I want to know from Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook how they are complying with the order that they agreed to abide by, based upon the need of which was based upon a previous invasion of individual privacy. So we have regulation. It's called the FTC, and it's called a consent order that Facebook has already agreed to.
Right, and the FTC is investigating whether Facebook breached that consent decree. And, you know, there are a lot of people out there saying that clearly Facebook can't regulate itself and that the regulation that we have is not enough. You know, what do you have to say to those people?
Well, I certainly wouldn't reach the conclusion that they're wrong. I think that's a reason to have a hearing. That's what we're going to at least start with. Our subcommittee, as well as the full committee, Chairman Thune, Chairman Nelson, have made significant inquiries of Facebook in asking for written responses. Today we have Mark Zuckerberg in front of the committee. A lot of what we hear today, I guess the issue is there enough assurance that Facebook is on the right path, that increasing regulations is not necessary. We may not reach the conclusion that Facebook is on the right path, and all of us may reach an agreement that now comes time for us to work together to figure out what the regulatory environment ought to be. But I would say that's not the place to start. Let's find out the facts, let's determine the circumstances, and let's see what Mark Zuckerberg has to say here in just a few minutes.
Mark Zuckerberg has come into this hearing very contrite. He has apologized. He said, I founded Facebook. This is my mistake. The buck stops with me. You know, how much does that mean to you, given that this is a long line of apologies he's made over the last decade or so?
Well, I mean, we always ask for contrition, for a recognition of wrongdoing, of error. And so to criticize somebody for admitting that an error had occurred, it's his watch for the statement that the buck stops here. That's what we look for in people. We want them to own up to their responsibility. So I would never criticize Mark Zuckerberg saying that. But we know whether that has meaning or not is what steps Facebook, what Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook now take to protect the privacy of Facebook users. And in my view, what takes place in order to make certain that, again, as I started our conversation, this doesn't happen again. So words are important. Actions are even more important.
All right, Senator Jerry Moran, thank you so much. You will be in that hearing room momentarily to question Mark Zuckerberg.